All right, good afternoon. I see we have just a handful of people. In the interest of time, we will begin. Allow me to welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. We're looking at the future of HR, emerging roles and critical skills. We have a discussant whom we introduce after we welcome the president to give his opening remarks. So at this time, allow me to hand over to the president, Mr. Nyirenda sir.
Thank you, Council Secretary and our host for this afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Moffat Nyirenda, President for Zambia Institute of Human Resource Management. I have the honor and privilege to welcome everyone this afternoon for this calendar event for the year. This is a second free webinar that the 14th Council is putting together. So I bring warm greetings from the 14th Council. In doing this, I think this event speaks to the first pillar of our strategy, which is enhancing the membership value proposition. We firmly believe that our members must be aligned in terms of what are the trending issues and topics. And today's topic, which is the future of HR, emerging roles and critical skills that are required, just speaks to that. I want to take this moment also just to thank I can now safely call him that our all-weather friend, Mr. Abdussain Tejan from UAE. I think he conducted a couple of webinars as well as physically came to Livingstone and presented. So Tejan, welcome again, and thank you so much for continuing to support the Institute and the profession in Zambia.
Thank you.
I would want also to take this moment also to thank you, CS and the Registrar for organizing this event, and I'm looking forward to today's topic. In doing the same, we continue to watch the space as we are, and this is to speak to in speaking to the topic for today, we continue to watch the space as we continue to operate in a highly volatile environment. Just this week, we have heard about the announcement of the partial withdrawal of our NAPSA savings. It has brought a lot of excitement in the market, but the questions will always come: what is it that HR should do to be able to guide our employees in the workspace so that they make most of the earning, the savings that they've had under NAPSA. So we will be arranging another webinar either late this week or early next week so that we can bring someone from NAPSA to speak about it, and also a seasoned HR to just guide the HR practitioners in terms of how are you going to add value following this announcement in your workstation. Allow me to now hand over back to our CSC, and I'll come back and give the closing remarks. Council Secretary, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and welcome to everybody that's just joined us right now. It is not a secret that HR professionals operate in an environment that is continuously evolving. Before now, HR practitioners were expected to stick to practices around recruitment and selection, performance management, compensation and benefits, learning and development, etc. But we see that with the changes that we can record in our environment, changes and advancement in technology, this role seems to evolve. The kind of skills that are required of HR practitioners seem to evolve. And so because of that, this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, we will be focusing on the topic, the future of HR, emerging roles and critical skills. And our discussant comes all the way from Dubai. His name is Abdussain Tejan. He is the managing director of People Matter, a consultancy firm that operates out of Dubai. And before then, he's worked in a number of organizations, including Standard Chartered Bank and other organizations that are based in that region. He descends from Tanzania, but I think he's practiced his HR HR, both in Africa as well as in the United Arab Emirates. And so, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at this stage to welcome Mr. Abdussan Tijan, and also just advise you that you will have a chance to ask questions towards the end of the session. We'll begin with Abdu making a presentation for about 30 to 40 minutes. After that, we will allow that we can engage in conversation, and you will be allowed to ask your questions. Abdu, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your kind words, as well as Malandula. Thank you very much for your introduction as well. It is a pleasure always to help Africa grow and develop as usual. Being an African, it's actually a pleasure to be able to help Zambia as well. As correctly pointed out, I did address the session last year when I had come for your annual meeting. And I did do one webinar prior to that as well. So I am relatively familiar with the Zambian market now. And I think a lot of what I'm going to try and present today is, I hope, to be relevant, because a lot of what I am presenting may look like it's actually made for a different world. But in reality, I think Africa is at a stage where it's actually going to springboard into the future very, very soon, if it has already not started as well. Just to give you a brief overview, the kind of work I do is in the consulting space, in leadership and human resources. I'm also a trainer as well. So I actually utilize my training to try and understand what is actually happening on the ground. And a lot of what I talk is based on experiential aspects. And to a large extent, having done a lot of work within Africa, Middle East, and Asia, which are my main markets, I think a lot of what I'm trying to explain in today's presentation is based on what I feel is going to be very critical. The process of change is obviously something that we all learn to deal with. And as far as I'm concerned, we are now in a phase where we need to learn to deal with things we know nothing about. So we're actually dealing with a future that is relatively unknown. Whilst there is an element of some predictability, but more and more, I feel unpredictability is going to be the norm going forward. How does one prepare for unpredictability? And I'm hoping today's session will help you bridge that gap between where you are today and getting to this futuristic state, to enable you to actually make a difference, because HR is a profession that for too long has not been seen as a forefront runner of the business. And the time is ripe now for us to actually take on this role. So hopefully, once you finish today's presentation, you will start to see a trend that will make you realize that where we are is not going to take us to where we need to go. So with that, allow me to actually share my presentation for today. And hopefully we will be in a position to try and get through all of these different facets that I have outlined for you today. There is a huge expectation that exists out there. There was a time when HR was seen as a poor cousin of whatever other entities existed within an organization. However, we're now starting to get our due. And to a large extent, believe it or not, COVID was an absolute boon for us in HR, because we were actually amongst those that were called on quite extensively to actually help with this particular scenario when COVID became an issue across the world. We were very fortunate in Africa that it wasn't as bad as the rest of the world. Nevertheless, we still ended up being affected. So some of the things that came out of our new role that we started to see becoming more prominent was the fact that businesses now started to lean a lot more on HR. And as far as HR is concerned, I would suggest that we look at it from 4 different perspectives. The first one is we were actually already managing the organizational performance. However, what was expected was a lot more than what we originally did. So we were involved in the design in terms of consulting. We were involved in the management of total rewards. We partook in terms of overseeing the performance management, and we kind of went into learning and development as well. However, what we are being expected to do now is to realize that being physically present, for one, is not necessary in today's world. Now, depending on the industry you are in, you obviously will be in a place where in some instances you might need to be physically there, where in some instances you might not. So, for example, the manufacturing circles, you cannot afford to have people working remotely because it's a production ground as such. So therefore, you need to be there physically. But let's say you work in the space of consulting or insurance, where you don't necessarily need to be there physically unless you're meeting with a client, you can operate from almost anywhere. So I'll give you an example of how something like that is manifesting itself in the world. Recently, the United Arab Emirates has actually approved a visa for people who don't work in the United Arab Emirates, but work across the world, but wish to live in an environment where it's conducive to them. The UAE being in a place where it's quite middle in the across the world, it's easy to get to different parts of the world, wherever you are. It's quite well entrenched in terms of infrastructure, be it in terms of roads, in terms of housing, in terms of electricity, in terms of connectivity. All of these things are quite well thought out and very stable here. So they are encouraging people to come and live in the UAE, even though you don't work here. There's a small fee to be paid for that, but it's actually a very good initiative on their part. So now think, what is that in terms of ramification for people around the world who are looking for talent? Talent can sit anywhere. You don't have to actually fly people in. You don't have to actually provide for housing. You don't have to actually pay them a transportation allowance. All you have to do is pay them a flat salary that allows them to operate wherever it is. So when you think about the ramification of how we need to look at the new ways of working, you'll realize the world has evolved and changed completely. But what it also brings about is you as a person who operates within different circles needs to be a much more connected networker where you are able to actually touch different peoples, which means your ability to connect in ways you've never done before needs to be much more. For example, a lot of us tend to be very comfortable recruiting face-to-face. But when it comes to recruiting people across a virtual space, it's not as easy because you cannot really see the body language extremely well. You cannot necessarily always work to a time that works for you alone because some of these people may be in different time zones. You may also start to realize that you don't necessarily need the complete cultural integration of somebody who understands, for example, in this case, Zambia, to be able to operate within a skill set that they are experts in and be able to pass it on in Zambia without falling into the trap of getting not to be able to understand the cultural nuances, as well as to be able to explain what they know in a manner that is transparent. Obviously, there is a need for us to, in Zambia, to be able to move into a space where we welcome people with differing cultures as well. So that too requires a certain sense of adjustment. You also need to be somebody who has the ability to understand how to bring different parties together. All right. And when you think about the different parties, you need to be able to look at it from different perspectives. on the business side, on the social side, on the deliverable side as well. All of that put together makes it very powerful if you're able to connect the jigsaw puzzle. So think about what that requires in terms of skill sets, which we will discuss shortly. Managing a team across different sites, across a virtual perspective, across an entity that may not sit in one site, even within Zambia. These are skills that in the past we took for granted. Yet we now need to be able to communicate much more effectively and ensure that information is getting to the right people at the right time. So all of this put together requires you to be some sort of an engineer within the space of HR. And you'll start to see this word engineering HR to becoming a very robust part of your vocabulary, because we're expected to no longer to be just providers of a service, but we are expected to be engineers of a future, which we have to put together. So think about that as we move on to the second aspect, which is you need to be an architect of culture and an activist, whereby you are actually taking into account all the different strengths people bring to the table, all right? And make sure you're presenting the organization in a way that allows for people to connect with what it is that you stand for. So when you think about it from that perspective, you'll realize that it is very important that you learn to understand that as much as we did brand building in the past, it was not really something that HR partook in. Now you are asked to play a more active role in building the brand. The brand is about how you speak about the organization. How is the organization perceived out there? Are you a custodian of what perception exists out there? All of this starts to become very critical, which means your role as a connector is becoming more and more important. All right. So question, when you think about the purpose of the organization, the values of the organization, in the past, we would kind of work towards helping people understand that, what the purpose and the values are. Now we're having to move into a much more defined space where we are being asked to hire people who actually have those abilities in terms of the values and can connect with our purpose, but also understand that they need to be advocates for those that are in the organization as well as those that are to come. So again, we're seeing connectivity from a different perspective. It's no longer just an HR job to connect with an external person. It's about the HR person connecting with internal people, external people, and connecting all of these different entities with what we stand for as an organization. All right. Now, what is social responsibility? Social responsibility, all right, is something that we're going to have to learn to understand. In the past, we had CSR, the corporate social responsibility. The social responsibility of today is about ensuring that you stand for the things that will attract your stakeholders, the people you recruit, the people that buy your products and services, and how you are perceived in the market out there. All of these different stakeholders need to be able to understand and buy into it. So let me give you an example of this. When you think about what you stand for, if you are a manufacturing concern and you require a body of water to be able to actually manufacture, when you use this water, how responsible are you with using this water and then getting rid of the extracts of whatever it is you're manufacturing? Are you polluting the environment? These are the kind of things, believe it or not, the younger generation, the millennials and the Generation Z are actually caring about. Your clients, the people who you partner with in terms of bringing this product together, care about it. the people out there that are buying your product are caring about it. So we're now moving to a very different space where the actual mind space is being governed by what you stand for as an organization. There may be occasions where people are also willing to pay a higher price for your product or service because you stand for the right things. Let that sink in. The third part, as HR, we used to try and attract people, undoubtedly. But now we actually need to move into a space where we realize talent is scarce, which means you can no longer be reactive to the needs of the organization. You're going to have to be proactive in terms of seeking talent wherever it is in the world. In the past, let's say, as I was explaining in my introduction, you could and probably worked within the space and the confines of the borders of Zambia. You now need to move into a space whereby you need to start thinking the whole world is your recruitment ground. You can start small by looking at, let's say, East and Central Africa. You can look at Africa, but eventually the world will come into play, because we now move into a space whereby we don't necessarily need to be in a position where we are bound by boundaries. All right. So just like the example I was giving you earlier on about the UAE, I'm very sure it won't be very long when something like that will start to permeate within the African countries as well. Because in certain instances, there are organizations that operate in environments where the political strife may not necessarily be very conducive, and attracting talent will be difficult. So the ability to have somebody sitting somewhere else and operating from afar might be an option that's pretty attractive. So that's the first part of this third section. But you also now need to move into coaching. Coaching is becoming a very important facet of what we do within HR. If I can give you one piece of advice as somebody who has been around within the space of HR, try and actually take on a coaching certification that will allow you to actually become a certified coach. The reason for the certification is not the piece of paper, in my opinion. The certification is actually about understanding how to actually coach in an effective way. The application of the coaching is more important than the actual certification. So when you actually go down the route of getting coaching, please try and select a coaching institute or a certification that gives you that breadth and depth of coaching in a way that will enhance your ability to provide a service that is enhanced in nature. The fourth one is with regards to the future. We know for a fact that change is inevitable, but now we also know that predictability is also not even easy to be done in this current environment. We're having change hit us at all different corners, and more, we're not able to predict what the future holds for us, which means we can only start to impact the organization and the environment in which we operate within a space of what we are able to forecast within the space of skills, within the space of approaching certain ways when something does happen, and to some degree, learn to understand and evaluate all the different aspects that affect us, be it within your country in terms of the laws, be it in terms of the political nature of what is happening within your country and neighboring countries, given the fact, for example, Zambia is actually dependent on all of its raw material coming from countries around, because you don't have direct access to the water transportation. So you are reliant on ideally ground transportation, trains, and to some degree, the ability to bring things via the air as well. All of this means that you have to ensure that you are aware of what is happening around your surroundings. The alliances that are being built around the world, all right? The whole political world is changing dramatically. So how you associate yourself with different organizations, different countries within the political arena, within the international arena, all of this are starting to play a very impactful part in what it is that we stand for and who we start to align ourselves with. So think about the future in not only just your organization. It has to go way beyond, and not only way beyond your borders, but across the world. Because in the past, we used to think that everything that came out of the West would actually impact us adversely. We're now starting to see that the whole world is moving away from the West towards the East, and we, being in the middle, are actually in a brilliant position to ensure that we're actually playing our cards right, to ensure that we're partnering with who really benefits Africa as a whole, as opposed to just taking what we have and benefiting themselves. So it's time for us to become smarter and better at negotiating our future. Now, what does this mean for HR? HR, one of the most important things that you will need to understand is this concept of agility. It's time to move away from the past when we were personnel. It's time to move away from some aspects of what we have been trying to incorporate in the last 10 years, which is the kind of concept we called HR business partnering. It's still an important part, but it's something that we need to actually think, how do we actually re-engineer HR business partnering to become more responsive to the business out there? All right. So we're now moving into a space where we're talking about flexible HR. Flexible HR is moving away from being very document oriented. We were in the past writing these huge documents that served as policy documents. Whilst these documents were very good at their time, we now need to understand, how do we actually adapt to a change scenario circumstance very fast and in a flexible way without it disrupting the judiciousness of what we do in HR. Why do I mention this concept of judiciousness? The concept of judiciousness is because we in HR have to always be the people that keeps the leadership and the people at bay in a very respectful way, to ensure that we're able to ensure that both sides are able to understand what is really happening and address it in a manner that does not skew it towards either side. So we need to learn to be able to adapt and talk to our people, and to be able to negotiate and persuade the management about what really is required and what is the sense of what's happening on the ground. Which means it's time to get away from actually sitting in our offices and be on the ground as much as possible. And you can only do that if you let go. What do I mean by let go? You have to learn to let go of the majority of the administrative aspects we tend to get involved in. Which means you now have to start to realize that what was your comfort zone will now force you to get into a zone that is not an area of comfort for you, which means you're going to end up having to learn new skills and be in a position whereby you're teaching those skills. So the faster we're able to be agile and adapt these situations, the better it is. And what I've just given you as this little introduction here for this slide is actually broken down into 4. We have to start to understand that we're dealing with people, which we've always dealt in the past. But during the time after personnel, we got into these humongous systems, right? These SAPs and the ERP systems, which kind of pushed us away from people. And we started to manage people via these systems. These systems were and are still very important because they are there to provide us with the ability to understand what data exists out there. What they cannot necessarily do is to actually do the work that we do as human beings within the space of HR. Human beings need to be treated differently. You cannot fall into the trap of treating human beings like machines or robots, which means you're going to have to deal with individualistic problems from time to time. Get the data from these systems, all right, and act with the ability that we have as human beings to be able to address these problems. The second part is with regards to understanding processes over the written documentation. We have to learn to be able to change when the circumstances requires us to change. What do I mean by that? We sometimes put down these policies where we talk about the concept of rewards and within the space of incentive as such. We look at rewards and we think, okay, we've got these particular breakups of how we remunerate people. These are the benefits we offer, and therefore it needs to be standard. We can't afford that anymore. Somebody who is sitting, I don't know, in another country working for an organization in Zambia doesn't need transportation. Does that mean we take away that component from them and therefore we actually shortchange them? Because they still have to operate within the country they're operating in, all right? They may not necessarily require housing because they're already sitting somewhere else. Maybe they are paying rent, so that housing component may be looked at from that perspective. Or if they're operating from a country of where they already have their own house, we need to think what other benefits could we provide to them that makes sense to this particular individual. So we're now starting to see that we actually need to look at the wider perspective, all right, of making us aware of how to become more agile and flexible within that space. And sometimes we have this ability to put plans together. And when you start to put plans together, something happens that disrupts that plan. You can't afford to continue with that plan. So your ability to not be flexible in that particular scenario doesn't help. So when you start building your plans, you need to inbuild your plans in such a way that takes into account certain levels of flexibility. A simple example is you plan your whole day, all right? And something happens that requires you to actually act and therefore cancel everything else, despite the fact that these things are important. The smart thing that we are being asked to do in this particular space is if you have an 8-hour work day, plan for 5 to 5.5 hours and always plan for 2.5 hours of disruption. So if nothing happens in those 2.5 hours, you can continue to do things that you may end up having to do the day after. So in reality, that is a prudent way of looking at it. But think about the whole concept of planning at an organizational level. If you plan how you're going to actually operate within the 365 days of the year, and you don't have any flexibility to do anything, for example, to actually work on initiatives that are long-term in nature, that may not sit within the KPIs of this year, all right? It's actually about making sure you have that ability inbuilt in, all right? Now, what are we looking at in terms of skills? Now, I'll come up with a summary at the end, which we will actually have a chance to look at. But from a skills perspective, I think the time has come for us to start to realize that when we are recruiting, it's imperative that we are recruiting people, all right, who have the ability to not only deliver for now, but for the future. What do I mean by that? They may not have those skill sets for the future yet, but they have the mindset to be able to learn on the job, continuously develop themselves, and are open to change. as opposed to finding people who just deliver a specific role and can no longer be trained up, reskilled to be able to do other things because they're very comfortable doing what they want to do. So if I can give you one piece of advice with regards to recruitment, the way recruitment is going, stop looking for experts in a specific field or in one field. Unless it's a very niche field, the majority of your people, 80% of your people, should be people who have the ability to do more than one skill within a skill base, all right? And more importantly, are open to change and redeveloping themselves and reskilling themselves, all right? The second thing that I think is going to become a very important facet is this concept of compliance within the space of fairness and transparency. This is a very important concept, which a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to, even today, despite it being very important. Why am I saying this? We're now moving into a space where we're moving into flexible work environments, hybrid work environments, cross-border working environments. All of this requires a certain level of understanding of not only just Zambian laws or the policies of your organization, but it also requires you to anticipate what future changes might come within Zambia itself, within the African context, within the world, because if you're dealing with people that have different perspectives, all right, in their own countries that affect them, you need to be aware of that as well. So your ability to comply becomes very important. And because we're now moving into a global work environment, you will realize very quickly, if you think you can break the law of another country sitting where you are, it's going to become very hard for you to hide wherever you are hiding as an organization, because you're going to see laws being enacted across the world for being able to actually work in this kind of an environment, which means you end up being in a position of being fined for breaking the law of another country. Let me give you an example of one that already exists today, all right? If you are working in Zambia, all right, you have an organization, let's say a mining industry in Zambia, all right, and you are hiring somebody from the US. The laws of the US are very clear that you have to pay taxes irrespective of where you are if you are an American citizen. So if at any given point in time, somebody tells you, all right, that I'm happy to work for you, but you need to be in a position whereby you actually fudge what my salary is because I don't want to pay too much taxation in the US. Well, believe it or not, in the banking world, this transparency is starting to become very, very rife now, where people are going to be in a position to share what is happening in terms of an individual's ability, as well as the organization and all the accounts that they hold. So your ability to fudge these kinds of taxation issues are going to be less and less going forward. So you are going to have to try and realize that the consequences are not worth the effort. The best thing to do is to anticipate these changes and be prepared for them, all right? When you think about the skills, you need to start to understand your business. You need to start understanding your business in such a way that will allow you to realize you can no longer recruit for now alone. You need to understand where is your organization going. What are the changes in the industry that are happening, especially within your own industry, within Zambia and across the world, all right, to enable you to be able to clearly articulate what you are looking for in terms of talent, what you're looking for in terms of developing these people for the future, and more importantly, to ensure you're hiring right, because the cost of hiring wrong is just too high. It's just not palatable anymore for us within the HR fraternity as such. So our ability to get it right as much as possible for the first time is becoming a critical component for us that we are going to be measured on in the very near future, if you're already not being measured on that. The third concept is the skill building aspect. It's about designing that future that I've been talking about. It's about preparing your workforce for that future. It's about being able to deliver for today whilst preparing for tomorrow. All right. And it's about being able to have the ability to communicate and mass share everything that you are doing within an entity, be it in one country, in multiple countries, in multiple sites. It doesn't matter. So it's about getting that ability to be able to find ways of minimizing your ability to hire more resources or expend more resources in terms of IT, and ensuring that you're able to pass all of that along as such. And last but not least, we cannot afford to think like we did in the past, where our KPIs were about the soft stuff. That is very important, but we still need to find ways of translating that soft stuff, all right, in a way that will help us measure what we are delivering. We can no longer afford to think that we in the past got away with it, we can still continue to get away with it. It'll not be possible. So let's move away from trying to actually hide and actually be very proactive in terms of coming up with those measures to enable us to continuously be seen as proactive and not reactive. But there is also another component, which is there is an expectation on us from employees. All right. The employees are expecting us to now operate in a way like your phones are operating, the smartphones that we all carry to a large extent. They expect to be able to, just swipe right and be able to say, yes, I will agree to this, or I am not agreeing with this. All right. They want to be in a position whereby they can actually update their own information wherever they are. They don't want to have to log into the company intrasite, which means we now have to be able to give intrasite access onto the smartphone. And we know what that means. That means that there are huge risks involved in terms of information and data potentially going out, which means IT security becomes a very integral part of every facet of what we do. Because information and data is our currency within the organization, especially within certain industries where it is quite secretive. It needs to be interactive, where they want to be able to talk to somebody without having to come from one side to another side, all right? Or come from one country to another country. They ideally want to be able to speak to somebody physically, virtually as such. And our ability to connect from that perspective is tremendous. I know for a fact that every time, if you are a huge organization that has a lot of blue-collar workers, every time after payday, you have people coming up to you and queuing up as to why this was deducted, what happened here, I didn't get this, I was supposed to get this. Can you imagine if you had if you were actually an organization that had 6,000 people, of which 4,000 are blue collar workers, all right? The queues outside of your HR department is immense. So we need to find platforms whereby we're actually making sure we're able to give them access to ourselves without having to have these difficult scenarios of having to deal with individuals that are queuing up outside the office. And let's face it, it's 1 day or 2 days in a month that you're looking at trying to resolve some of these issues. Then we need to, they're looking for personalization. I want to be in a position whereby I can access my information, I can update my information, I can actually get to the right person where I need a specific assistance with. All of this put together needs to be accessible. They also want transparency. In the past, can you imagine, we used to always hide behind the cloak of, I'm sorry, I can't reveal to you the salary bands because it's confidential. We cannot tell you that. Well, guess what? Everyone out there is moving into that transparent mode. And if you're not able to tell people what the salary bands are for their particular grade, you're going to start getting these individuals thinking you're hiding, which is eventually what is going to happen, is going to be that these people are going to walk. They're going to leave you because they feel you're being disrespectful by not being transparent. So they want to see that level of transparency. They also want to be in a position where they want to be connected, and connected is not literally about being able to be in an app. A lot of organizations have different systems, processes, or apps that actually relate to something different. There's one that's related to marketing, there's one that's related to HR, there's one that's related to finance, there's one that's related to IT. All of this put together becomes very cumbersome if they don't talk to each other. So if I update something in one particular system, and then it doesn't end up actually talking to the other system, and I have to update the same thing again and again, it becomes very challenging. So people then are put off, and then they end up not being in a position to use the system effectively, which means you then end up having not enough data to be able to make the correct decisions or take the right course of action to address this particular issue. And obviously, HR needs to be very tech savvy as well, because technology is moving into space where, as we are all aware now, we're talking about artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is not only something that we need to be well versed with in HR, but we also need to understand how it can actually circumvent some of the work we do within HR. Because a lot of times we're now moving into a space, for example, you're interviewing somebody online, they have a window open, all right, that's actually half of the screen, and the other half of the screen, they're talking to an artificial intelligent person where they're typing the question that you are asking them, and that they're waiting for the artificial intelligent person or machine to actually give them an answer. Can you imagine how frustrating that must be if you can't tell the difference between somebody who has the ability to actually answer these questions themselves, or is actually using artificial intelligence to answer those questions for you? So you need to be not only conversant, you need to understand it so well that you're able to spot those individuals who try to circumvent these particular systems within which we operate in HR today. Let's look at some of the roles now. I know I've got literally about 7 minutes left, so I'm not going to actually go through all of these, but I want to give you a flavor, and I want to summarize that I can give all of you a chance to ask questions at the end. The roles of the future are of three parts. They are strategic ones, they are those that are people-oriented, and they are those roles that are engineering-oriented. So if you recall, right from the outset, I was explaining to you that we now need to move into a space where we need to reconstruct how things are going to happen in the future. All right. From a strategic perspective, there are these three roles that I've identified. All right. And realistically, I think for me, what is really important now is to start moving away from titles. In the past, titles were a source of pride, in my opinion. And a lot of these titles were then moved into a space where it was talking to the individual's ego. But now we need to move into a space whereby it's not about what title I carry. It's about what role I fulfill. Am I doing what I enjoy doing? Am I doing what I love doing? Do I have the ability to wake up in the morning and think I'm doing something I love and continually want to do? If those questions are answered in the positive, then it doesn't matter what those titles are. Nevertheless, I've given you the kind of things that are fun to look at, and then I've given you a perspective of what could be the potential title in today's scenario. So when you think about the futurist, you're talking about somebody who has the ability to develop a vision and work with the senior management to ensure that you're actually crafting your strategy as an organization and allowing that to permeate down into the different parts of the organization in a way that allows you to be involved in every aspect, which means you need to understand the business really very well. Then you have the networker, all right? Somebody who actually puts different people together. Think about this person as being a project planner, all right? This person is the kind of person who realizes we have a problem. We need to actually put a team together. It's about knowing who is where, who brings what to the table, and is able to actually make it materialize very quickly, all right? This person is going to be somebody who actually ensures whatever problem is being faced or whatever challenge is being brought to the table is being overcome, ideally in a very agile way, in a very flexible way, in a speed in which you are able to overcome this and it does not have an adverse impact on you as an individual. The change agent is obviously quite obvious. This individual, all right, is about being able to bring together different systems at a time when it's needed, let go of systems when needed, bring the right people in, ensure that you're able to identify what are the key deliverables, what are the different resources required, be it people, be it money, be it external providers, all of these different things, all right, is somebody who actually has the ability to put this. When you think of the networker as being a project manager, the change agent is also a project manager, all right, but in a different circumstances. So the networker could be somebody who is futuristic in nature, who is looking at something that is about to come. The change agent is somebody who is acting in the now, in a way that is able to address a specific issue that's acting on individuals or an organization within the entity that they operate in. Then you have the people roles. You have the storyteller. For me, this is a beautiful role because one of the biggest challenges we face as organizations is when you think about what people buy into within an organization, one of the key things they buy into is storytelling. When we tell enough success stories, when we actually showcase individuals who have proven themselves by starting from the bottom and moving up to the top, all of these things are actually very powerful. And believe it or not, there is a place for somebody like a storyteller within the organization. So in this particular space, we're talking about marketing within an HR concept. HR has got this aura that it's surrounded by, that they are a cost center. They are the kind of individuals who try and keep confidentiality. They never give us answers. They think they are, you know, a different breeds. They are kings and queens. All of these things I've heard. Well, believe it or not, it's time to change our perception. And somebody who can actually market HR is going to be a key person in the very near future. Then there's the mobilizer, somebody who actually takes the strategies and puts it into effect, all right? An implementer. So it's important that you think about delivery as being a critical part of what we do. It's no longer about creating these huge castles in the air and we have no deliverables as HR. Then the third one is the curator. The curator is somebody who actually understands the branding concept that we need to live with as an organization and ensures that this particular person is more like a digital marketeer out there in ensuring that we stand for what we really want to stand for. All right. So this person is somebody who makes everything come together from a branding perspective. Then you have the composer. All right. The composer is somebody, one, who who ensures that they are connecting all the right people. So when you have blue collar workers and they want to have an outlet of being able to vent about their problems, about their challenges, you're the kind of person who actually puts these people together with the right people. So you're the connector and ensures you're actually doing it in a manner where it's not disruptive, but at the same time, give them the feeling of being heard. All right. So you have to look at it from a perspective of what kind of an organization you actually are and what is the culture of your organization. How best can this be addressed within the context of your industry as such? All of this put together requires this individual to understand data. All right. So you're able to understand data in terms of being able to sift through the different aspects of data in such a way that will help you get to a place where you're able to make the right decision. The last one within the people space is the insurer. The insurer is somebody who actually takes the comp and bend role, but now is looking at it in a more flexible way, where they're able to actually craft a compensation package almost on an individual basis for people, because we need to move away from the standardization aspect which we were involved with in the past. So we're now starting to move in that agility space and flexibility space to try and compensate people as best as we can based on their needs as such. The third component, as I said, is the engineering role. All right. The first one is the gold digger. You're always looking for different ways of getting people. All right. So you're looking for talent. This guy is the talent attractor. This is the person that's digging for gold. This is the person that's extracting those pieces of diamonds or copper that we know exist out there. But you have to find different ways of doing it. The way we've always done it in the past is no longer valid. In the past, you put an advert in the newspaper, all right, and you get people applying. Then we moved into a space where we had websites. People wrote to an email address. Today, we're using the social media, all right? We are now moving into a space where we're no longer even looking at the social media aspect on its own. We're looking at effective social media. Where can I make the biggest impact? Where can I get the most people? All right. How do I actually do it differently? I'll give you a classic example. There was an HR exhibition here in the UAE very recently. And one particular organization hired the space for their booth, all right, where they wanted to showcase, you know, like you have HR organizations looking to recruit people at university levels. Well, this particular organization was at this particular, conference was all about HR. And this particular organization said, we're going to do nothing but recruitment. And the people that attended were not necessarily just graduates. They were people who were working already, all right? And what these guys did was they actually ended up showcasing an artificial intelligence robot. It wasn't a physical robot. It was actually a virtual robot. It was just a projection of a human being who was actually doing an interview and talking about the organization. So you can actually go up to that individual and somebody sitting behind was actually answering all the questions in a virtual setting. And you can imagine that particular booth was extremely popular. So think about where this is taking us into the future. How else can you recruit? All right. Chances are the recruitment that you are doing right now, sitting where in Zambia for the world, may change. You might need one person sitting as a recruiter in Zambia, one person sitting them in the Middle East, or one person sitting in Asia or South America, all right, who does recruitment for you. And you'll be surprised, you can use these outsourced agencies in terms of the what do you call them? The recruitment agents out there, All right. But in reality, you may find that given the number of people you're recruiting, it's more cost effective for me to have a recruiter sitting in Rio de Janeiro or sitting in Toronto or sitting in Azerbaijan for that matter. So it doesn't matter where it is you are, you have to be able to do it differently and continuously evolve. The geek, this is the person that has the ability to take everything that is happening within the space of IT and is able to bring it to life, put it together, and ensure that you have the ability to bring all of this information to the person who needs to make a decision extremely quickly. Now, can you imagine if you had this kind of a person today? It would be outrageous, because you take your performance management system, you take your ERP system, all right, you take your IT systems and talk to each other and bring about a decision that usually takes a month to come together within a space of 1 hour. That's how quick we're able to do things today, if you have all the right pieces in place. And last but not least, we're talking about an architect. The architect person is somebody who is always continuously helping people grow and develop. You are the person who is in charge for designing the future learning solutions, be it on the ground, be it virtually, as well as in some instances, self-developed. So in some instances, some people are self-motivated to learn, all right? You provide platforms for them to go in and design their own learning. You're no longer reliant on one individual to design it. You have experts out there who know their jobs, let's say within the space of the technical aspects. They know their job, but they want to learn. So what they can do is they can actually utilize technology in terms of building solutions using artificial intelligence for their own training, to train themselves and to train their team as such. So think about how this particular role is evolving in such a short period of time. Learning is no longer face-to-face. Learning is no longer virtual. Learning is no longer just self-development. Learning is no longer just reading. Think about reading as such. We are raising a generation of youngsters who don't love to read, but give them anything to do with technology, they love it. So can you imagine if you created a learning circle within your organizations or within other organizations where you learn from each other, all right, in a virtual space, in a way that allows you to actually stop being prescriptive about learning solutions as well. So put that all together, what do we come up with? We come up with, I'm sorry, there are 3 more. I'm not going to go through them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pass on all of these slides to the conference and make sure that you get it so that you have the ability to see it for yourself. But I want to actually wind up with these skill sets, with these approaches that you need to try and actually come up with as HR. The first one is fairly obvious. You have to embrace technology. But for technology, it's not just about utilizing technology. It's about taking technology and using it correctly from an analytical perspective. To be able to use artificial intelligence in a way that is judicious, whereby you're not just giving a solution that a machine is giving. Remember, the moment you forget that your role requires you to deal with human beings, you've lost the plot. 2, understand what does success mean for the company. Understand the business, understand the direction in which it's going, and understand what it takes to bridge the gap between where you are and where it's going. 3, leadership. You can no longer afford to have followers and leaders. You need leadership in every facet of the organization, from the top all the way to the bottom. And it has to start with you showing leadership. It has to start with you stopping other people from growing because you feel threatened. The world is an oyster, all right, where you can operate from anywhere. If you show yourself to feel threatened by somebody within HR growing up and taking on your role, I think we're being very short-sighted in the way we operate. So the leadership has to start with us. All right. Change and change consulting. All right. You have to learn to manage change. Change is such an important facet. When I train people on change management, what I try to get them to realize is it doesn't matter where you are in the organization. Yeah. Change is something that you have to learn to deal with, even if you're the lowest on that rung of people in the organization. If they don't know how to react to change, it permeates up the line and it forces a person to make a decision that is 7 or 8 layers above, which kind of slows down the whole process. And in today's world of speed and agility, you can't afford that. Stakeholder management, you need to learn to understand that I'm not only just answerable to my boss. I have different stakeholders that need me. And my ability to be able to interact correctly, respectfully, and be able to provide for what their needs are is ideal as an individual to have as a skill. Cultural. You need to have that cultural understanding. Even within Zambia itself, all right, there are different nuances in terms of languages, cultures, the way of operating, all right? The way you operate within a specific region, the way you operate within a specific city, right? All of these things are there within Zambia. But we're now moving into a global world. How do you operate in that global world? You need to have that ability to understand that. You need to have critical and systems thinking. The ability to say, you know what, I don't think this is critical. Let's move away and focus on what we really need and make it happen. And your ability to address it in such a way that enables you to look at things logically while looking at it flexibly, to make sure that you're not just building a system that cannot change, that refuses to adapt, but you also need to build into that agility as such. Then you need to build the transparent strategy, all right? Because this is about decision making. This is about trust. Trust is the most important component of any organization. If there is one currency that you cannot exchange in an organization, it's trust. If you have trust within an organization, that organization has the makings and foundations of success. 9, never forget you are a people entity. All right, never ever forget that. As much as we will have machines coming in, artificial intelligence coming in, never forget that people will never ever be replaced. Roles may be replaced, skills may be replaced, but people will never be replaced. Because our ability to function in the moment and understand different facets and put things together and still be humane in the way we approach things is never be replaced. Be ready for the new workforce. We're dealing with the millennials. We're now at Generation Z. We're talking about the next generation, which is the Alpha generation. All of these different generations are different in their needs, in the way they think, in the way they operate. And if you're not prepared, you're still going to be stuck in that older generation that they just did what you told them to do. It's not going to work. What they want, what they need is going to impact whether they buy into you or not as an organization, whether they buy your products or services, and more importantly, whether they buy into you as an organization, all right, as to whether you stand for the right things. 11, re-engineer work. Re-engineering work is something that comes from what we currently know today as workforce planning. Your ability to be able to get to that level of understanding and make sure you're able to re-engineer how your workforce is structured in terms of understanding the business, in terms of understanding the roles, and re-engineering them to adapt to an external environment, to adapt to an internal change. All of these things are a critical component of what you are going to be asked to do in the very near future. if you're not already being asked to do that. Project management skill. This is the second thing that I'm asking you to try and certify yourself. Find the right people or the right entity, the right certification, and get yourself certified as a project manager. Project management skills are by far one of the most important skills that you need to have within your repertoire or within your the quiver of your arrows. Resilience. Why is resilience so important? We live in a world, because it's almost changing daily, all right? We're going to continuously fail much more than we have failed in the past, which means your ability to actually be resilient and pull yourself up quicker than you've done in the past is so critical. So if you have the ability to feel that I'm always depressed or I'm always failing, believe it or not, don't worry about it. In fact, the world today is failing faster than it ever has before. And because of that completeness of its ability to accept failure, it's actually improving much faster. So failure is part of a cultural aspect that needs to be integrated within your organization. As number 14 is, I think, self-explanatory. I've explained it to you. All right. Stop being very rigid about how you remunerate people in terms of rewards strategy. 15, we've talked about compliance and ethics. This is an important aspect because it relates to how you attract, it relates to your clients, it relates to how you operate. And last but not least, please don't think you know it all. You may think that, okay, I'm the head of HR, I'm the VP of HR. I don't need to move any higher. Believe me, it won't be very nice when you have a very junior person who has more transferable skill sets replacing you, even though you may have the 20, 25 years of experience. But because you're inflexible, you think you know it all, you don't want to continuously learn, develop, and evolve, you're going to be replaceable very quickly. All right. So if I can summarize just right at the end here, before we go in the Q&A, I want us to realize that we are human beings. There is a limit to how much we can evolve. But to actually think I don't have the ability to evolve is starting from a negative foundation. I think the mental state in which we need to start off with is, I am a human being that has tremendous ability that has been gifted to me from God. And because God has gifted me, I know God makes the best of things. And therefore, I have the ability to do much more. If you believe that, and you allow yourself to believe that, all right, within yourself, especially within your heart, I guarantee you, you will continuously be a valuable person, not only just within the workplace, but within the world itself. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. I'm sorry I took a little longer, Malandula.
That's all right, Abdul. Thank you so much for this very, very wonderful presentation. I think it's been very, very insightful. Key highlight for me is, and I'm going to quote you here, roles will be replaced, but not people. So the evolution continues, but people can be replaced. The first question I'm going to pose to you is around, with the fact that there's so much diversity now in the HR space, from the spectrum of skills required, where should HR people come from? What kind of preparation should people have for them to be able to succeed, in the future of HR? That would be the first question.
Okay.
And over to you.
Thank you very much. So let me give you an answer based on somebody who is currently studying and has not graduated, for example. Somebody like that, when you think about hiring somebody from an HR perspective, we tend to go ideally down the route of hiring people who ideally have HR, have studied HR, have ideally studied business, and or within the space of data and those kinds of things. But I think the time has come for us to start looking at people who come from different backgrounds and hiring them into HR and grooming them into the HR space. In fact, I would say in today's world, hiring somebody from a pure HR background to come into HR is wasting talent. When I say wasting talent, I'm not suggesting we don't hire them. I'm saying you're not bringing that diversity aspect into your organization. Think about it. When somebody comes in from an engineering background into HR, that systems thinking I was talking about and the ability to actually craft something from nothing, all right, and be able to put a jigsaw puzzle together is something that an engineer can do quite well. Or for that matter, the ability to troubleshoot. So somebody who has done some programming, all right, and comes from that kind of a background, the kind of person I was talking about who has the ability to put all the IT aspects together would ideally be somebody who comes from an IT background, but is then taught HR and to appreciate HR. So the time has come for us to try and attract people from different disciplines and groom them, as opposed to having people who already know HR and come with predisposed ideas of what HR is all about. Ideally, they should read that with a view to addressing the needs of the future and not come and impose what they've learned and think that they can actually impose that and actually it's a solution fix. No, it isn't.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I can see questions are coming in now. We'll get to the questions just now. Please, attendees, just use our Q&A tab to submit your questions, and we will surely get to them. We still have a lot of time before we close the session. Another question, Abdu, is of the roles that you've talked about, I know that data has come out as one of those, I think, underlying, denominators in almost every aspect that you've spoken about. What % of the future HR roles do you see requiring people to have a certain level of competence, appreciation of data analysis and stuff like that?
Okay, I don't think I can give a specific percentage, but let me give you the answer based on this. When you think of the 3 different roles that I identified, I looked at strategic roles, I looked at people roles, and I looked at engineering roles. At a strategic level, your need for complete data is very minimal. So at that point in time, you need a big picture ability analysis to be able to gain that insight that you want to be able to come up with that. So at that level, I would say data is probably 10 to 15%. At a people perspective, I would put it more at a 40% because you are there trying to actually impact what is currently happening, all right, within the organization. So you still need a lot of data. At the engineering level, because you're crafting something for now and the future, you're going to need a lot more data, which means you're going to have a lot more data points than you did in the past. So I would put that at more about the 60 to 65% mark. Okay,
great. Thank you. Thank you for that response. I would tackle, I'll read out the first question, which comes from Mopeje. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And the question reads, my question is coming from the aspect of employee expectations. How best can an HR professional interact with employers? Over to you, Abdu.
It seems like a very broad question. I'm not sure if Mopeje, can you give me a little more specific a question that relates to what it is you're addressing? And I'll try and address that because this particular question is quite broad and it would take me quite a bit of time. So I really want to help you, but please try and maybe respond to the question that you've just given by giving me a little more narrower way of looking at it so I can address it.
So maybe we could pick an angle, Abdul, with the fact that we're talking about the future of HR and the influence of technology and all. You've mentioned that people won't be replaced. What would your recommendation be in as far as engaging employees is? Let's say you do have technological spaces that you can use. You've got your chatbots and you've got your chats, and you have all these channels that employees can use to be able to reach out to you. If you are setting up the communication space for HR, how would you set it up? What would you expect? How much interaction would you set, and how much of leveraging off of technology would you want to be able to put in place?
All right. So let me ask you, it's a rhetorical question. Let me ask you this.
Sure.
When you think about setting up an interaction aspect to all the people that we service in HR, what is better, more or less? All right. So ideally, the answer is more. All right. You don't want to be able to get to a place where you are no longer interacting with people out there. So you ideally want to be in a space where you want to be able to interact more. How would you set up something like that? Ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, what kind of communication is ideal given the size of my organization? Number 2, what medium are people most comfortable with as such, given that in some instances, depending on the generation, some are face-to-face, some want to do it virtually. And the third thing is, obviously, it's going to depend on how much money I have to spend from a budgeting perspective to be able to put all of this together. But under all of these 3 questions, there is one key foundational question that needs to be addressed. I, as an HR person, need to be comfortable with the fact that I have to ensure that a majority of my time is being addressed and faced with having to deal with people. If right now I do 70% administration, all right, 20% I do paperwork, and 10% I interact with people, I think it's going to be very challenging to be able to work with that kind of distribution. So you need to move into the space whereby you realize I need to move towards a 60 to 70% interaction, be it virtually, be it face-to-face, we're using different mediums, whatever it is. But you have to start engaging with more and more, because the space in which we are operating in regards to what the future holds for us, we can no longer afford to think, for example, look at all the roles that I identified for you. There were 15 roles there, all right? When you think about 15 roles, when do I actually have the ability to justify that I can hire 15 people in an organization? Can I hire 15 people for a group of 100 people? Obviously not. So you have to learn to find ways of combining some of those roles with individual as you grow. Is 15 people acceptable for a group of about 500? I would say absolutely yes. So it's all about being able to find what is the correct balance where people are not getting frustrated, but at the same time, they're not eating into your time, whereby you're able to do your day-to-day work, you're able to address their needs, but you're also shoring up the future. Because if you can't do all of that, you're going to always end up reacting. You're not going to be in a position to be able to prepare for the time when you are actually going to need to do things on the fly because you did not prepare for it in the future.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. I have another question coming from Darius. And the question reads, in relation to skills development, what's more beneficial between studying a degree or master's degree or going for certification?
All right. This is my favorite one, which I'm sure, oh, that's the reason why Malandula is smiling, because he knows this about me very well. You know, my question to you is, what do you remember from the time you studied in university as such? All right, very little. In fact, 5% is the majority of answers that people remember after about 3 years in terms of the content. But what you will still remember is the approaches that you took, all right, the brainstorming sessions, the collaboration that you did in terms of project work with other people. Those are the kind of things that remain. So the question is, do I need to go to a university? My answer is yes, if you are learning a specific discipline that you want. However, you have to supplement your university degree with some of these certifications. And in fact, we are getting to a stage where the universities are now starting to realize that they are no longer a preferred route for young people to actually study. So they are starting to realize that all the examination that they use, examination boards talk about regurgitation of data. It doesn't talk about the ability to implement that data in a specific way. So universities are changing the way they teach. They are changing the way they evaluate. They are changing their curriculum to incorporate some of these certifications. And if they're not, they're offering ways to enable you to actually do that. So for those of you that are familiar with American degrees, all right, or the IB curriculum for that matter, you realize that there are certain core subjects that you have to do. There are certain subjects that are related to your degree or discipline that you end up having a choice with, depending on the specialization you wish to take. And then you have free electives that you can actually choose that encompass some of these certification subjects. So again, you need to be very judicious about how you choose these degrees, but the world at large is moving away from hiring people with a first degree, not because it's no longer valuable, but they would prefer to groom these youngsters to do things in a specific way that is related to them being able to utilize their mind that has not in any way been cast in a specific way in stone because of the way they've been conditioned in the university. So it depends, but if you decide to go for a first degree, do it, but implement these certifications later on. And as I said to you in the presentation, please, the certification is the least of your challenge. That piece of paper means nothing. It's your ability to apply what you have learned that really means a lot. So you have various entities out there that teach the subject extremely well, but are not associated with any certification. So if a university degree is not important, why is a certificate important? So it's about the skill. It's about the application of that skill.
All right. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, keep the questions coming. We still have a little bit of time before we wrap up the session. Abdul, I have a question here. And this probably goes to, I think, the offering of the services that you have. The question is around, is there some kind of path that you could use to guide organizations that want to move from, defining roles in a traditional sense, traditional HR science, to some of these more futuristic perspectives that you've shared today? Would there be some kind of a maturity curve, some kind of a path that you would be able to provide or to be able to coach or guide people through?
All right. Looks like I'm being asked to give my service free of charge here as a consultant. Nevertheless, I will give you a flavor of what a particular client of mine asked me to do, and hopefully this will give you an answer. There was a particular client who was based in an industry, a manufacturing industry, but they were not the manufacturers. They were the people that actually connected the manufacturers with the buyers. Okay. All right. So they ensured quality, they ensured delivery, they ensured that there was continuity in the evolvement of the product that the manufacturers were making, that were reaching the client, that was responsive to the corporate social initiatives, depending on where it was going around the world as such. So when they brought me in, they asked me to actually evaluate their organization from exactly the same point that the question asks. What I found extremely surprising was this particular client was already at the top. They were the leaders in the industry, in the space they were operating in. So as opposed to actually being very happy being at the top, they were like, the owner was like, I don't want to continue staying here. I want to continuously evolve to make sure that whoever's trying to catch up with me is not going to catch up. So every time I want to be at least 3 or 4 steps ahead of my competition. So what we did was we evaluated the organization, and we looked at it from 3 perspectives. 1, a state of readiness for them to change. 2, the structure in which they currently operated in. And 3, the skills required to move to the next level. So when we looked at these 3 facets, we actually obviously came up with a matrix that allowed us to say, these areas they are brilliant at, these areas they need to do a little bit of work in, these areas they are really missing specific areas, and they need to address this. So all of this started to actually formulate into a strategy from a recruitment perspective, from a re-engineering perspective, from a developmental perspective, and all of this put together became a robust plan of action that that I think, if I recall correctly, was about a 3-year plan to address these shortfalls and ensure they were moving in the right direction. And obviously, for something like this to work, it requires tremendous involvement of senior and, more importantly, the middle management. So until and unless all of these people buy into something like this, it's going to be very hard to implement something like this, of this nature. So whoever is asking the question, yes, it is possible. Yes, I have done it. And yes, I can help you. I did put up my contact details on the last slide, and it was there on the first slide as well. So if you want to reach out to me, feel free, and be very happy to have that conversation.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Just received another question here. Mine is a comment. And this is coming from John Sakala. Mine is a comment. I want to agree with the presenter on not only depending on pure breed HR persons. I have a finance and audit background, but now working in HR, I treat staff the way I wished HR would treat me the time I was a non-HR employee, and it works perfectly. I can say other employees find it easy to engage with me. Thank you. All right, thank you for that comment and contribution, John.
Thank you, Don. This is going to be the future. Almost every profession, whether you are in finance, whether you are in IT, you are in marketing, you are in, I don't know, whichever one you look at, this concept of diversity has to start with diversification of the kind of people we employ within our entities. It's time for us to move away from hiring clones and hire mavericks, people who are different, people who will challenge the status quo, people who bring a different set of values, a different set of thinking that actually will challenge and grow the organization in directions we've never grown before.
Great. We have another question from Valeta Kalogela. And the question reads, what are some of the opportunities and challenges in employing HR strategists? I think that the question is speaking to what are some of the common pitfalls that HR people run into when trying to transform and prepare for the future, as you've put it. Would there be any specific items and issues that you think that HR practitioners must be watchful of as they endeavor to reposition for the future of HR?
Okay, 3 things. I'll quickly go through them. Number 1, if you are the kind of person who has the ability to think differently and try and prepare for the future, you will need 3 different skill sets. Number 1, you have to learn to be a consultant. All right, a consultant from a perspective of being able to understand all the different stakeholders and bring it all together. All right, so your consulting ability is related to your ability to asking the right questions to ensure you're getting the right inputs. The second skill set that I think is very important to be able to do this is to actually move into a space where you change the way you sell. All right, so when you come up with this proposal, it's about not just saying, oh, it's good for the organization and all that. You need to move into a space where you force people to realize the consequence of not buying into your idea. So you need to relate it to a remuneration aspect or a monetary aspect of the cost of not doing what it is that you're proposing. And number 3 is you have to learn to be a great negotiator. You cannot afford to be in a place where you think just because you're a great consultant and a great seller, you will be able to actually sell. You also need to be able to realize that negotiation is about understanding what has to be done, what can be done, and what is nice to have. And if you understand those different facets, you'll realize very quickly that you are able to compromise on those areas that are nice to have, but might be very important for the other party. All right, but you will realize that you have to win on certain areas. So it's about making sure that you understand which battles are worth losing and which ones have to be won.
All right, great. And thank you so much. That was our last question. Allow me to thank you, Abdu, for your time, the preparation, the insights that you've shared this afternoon. Like I think the president indicated, you are an all-weather friend to the Institute, and we look forward to probably more collaboration with you in this space. I think that there's a lot more that you could share and help practitioners use from a perspective of sharpening competencies and just improving on any service offerings. Would you have any final words before I hand over to the president at this stage?
No, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. And as you correctly point out, I have an affinity for the ZIHRM, and I will always continue to be available to you guys. It's obviously very nice, but it's obviously not very conducive to not be able to see these 63 participants that were there. Yeah, but it would be nice to see them face to face as well, and hopefully that opportunity will present itself very soon. But thank you very much. I sincerely hope it was a useful session and one that added value to the conference as well as to the people that attended.
Thank you so much, Abdu, and thank you so much for your time once again. Mr. President, are you there? Allow me to hand over the torch back to you.
Thank you so much, Council Secretary and host for this afternoon. I wanted just to say that just last Saturday, we did host our students at the University of Zambia with a similar topic, which is the future of HR, tips and opportunities for students. I want to say that Abdu has done justice to the topic today, and I want to take this opportunity to thank him for the time again. This is for free, and it's not we should not take this for granted. So Abdu, thank you for your continued relationship and collaboration with the Zambia Institute of Human Resource Management. Let me also take this opportunity, Council Secretary, for ably handling the session. Thank you so much, and the Registrar and your team at the Secretariat for enabling this presentation and webinar to happen. Thank you so much. Also, our members, esteemed members who have joined this session, we will continue to have these sessions to build the capacity in all of us. Personally, I feel refreshed, inspired this afternoon with the content that has been shared by our presenter. So, like we mentioned in our opening remarks, we will be arranging very soon again with a current trending topic, which is the partial payment of NAPSA. So it's an exciting time. We've seen things happening on social media. So we'll be requesting NAPSA management to give us a resource person and a seasoned HR practitioner who can sit around for just an hour or so and just delve into the large topic so that we are well equipped as HR practitioners to support. I think with those remarks, on behalf of the 14th Council, thank you so much, Abdul, again, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to everyone, just note that this webinar has been recorded and it's going to be posted on our website. In case there are any colleagues from your teams that have not attended, please feel free to share the link with them from the website. And there's many more resources there, including previous webinars that were facilitated by Abdu and other people. So yeah, hope that you find the resources are useful, and God bless. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.